then glanced outside her shop where the wagon sat. Her eyes narrowed a little more. "Who's that darky you got with you?" she asked. "She's one of our house slaves. I've never seen her before. Is she Beulah's pickaninny?" "No, ma'am. She's ugly as sin." "Not when you get to know her, ma'am, and she's real smart." "Well, she doesn't look any smarter than she does comely," huffed Mrs. Hammond, who didn't like anyone telling her anything, especially a young girl. She took any statement by someone else, especially if it expressed an opinion on just about any topic under the sun, as grounds for contradiction. "No, she doesn't look like she has a single brain in that little black head of hers," she added after a minute. "I'm not sure I like the sound of it one bit." "We'll be back when we've done our other errands," said Katy. "When you've got our order ready." Then she turned and walked back outside. The black girl they were talking about sitting in the wagon outside was me. Course, I couldn't hear everything from where I was sitting, but Katy told me all about it later. This is our story, hers and mine together. I'm Mary Ann Jukes, but folks call me Mayme, which I figure you might as well, too. The girl inside the general store and post office was named Kathleen Claiborne. Folks called her Katy. At least her friends did. That's what I called her, or Miss Katy. Katy and me were in a pretty bad fix, 'cause the war had left us all alone in the world. That's what we were doing together. I reckon I ought to tell you a little about it. You see, Katy and me had found ourselves together about a month and a half before, when some real bad men called Bilsby's Marauders had come through Shenandoah County after deserting from the army. When the Marauders came through, they killed people at both my master's plantation and at Katy's. I'd been fetching water and was away, and that's why I didn't get shot. And Katy's mama had hidden her in the cellar of their house, so they didn't find her either. But they killed both of our families. I left as soon as I'd finished the burying. After wandering a spell, I found myself at Katy's plantation. When we first saw each other, neither of us knew what to do. But gradually we started talking. I spent the rest of the day there, figuring at first that Katy needed someone to take care of her for a spell, until she got used to what had happened. But she wanted me to keep staying, so I did. And gradually, a week, then 2, then finally 3 passed. All that time, the 2 of us just lived there in that great big plantation house all alone, milking the cows and making bread and taking care of ourselves. Katy showed me books and gave me one of her dolls and taught me how to read better. And I taught her how to do things like chop wood and sing slave revival songs. She read me stories from books, and I told her stories from memory. But all the while, I knew I needed to be getting away from Rosewood. That's what Katy's folks' plantation was called. If anybody found me, a colored girl and a runaway, sleeping in a white man's bed, I knew they'd skin my hide or hang me from a tree or something else pretty bad. I didn't know what had happened to my own master. He might be alive or dead for all I knew. But mostly, I was worried about what would happen to Katy. I tried to get her to think about her own future and what she ought to do. She had 3 uncles and an aunt. The aunt lived up north somewhere, but Katy had never seen her. One of her uncles lived not too far away, and after Katy told me about him, I was afraid he might try to get his hands on the plantation. Another of them had gone to California, hoping to find gold, and Katy figured him for dead. The third was a ne'er-do-well that came around sometimes when he needed money from his sister, which was Katy's ma. Katy didn't seem to like any of them, and didn't cotton much to the notion of going to live with any of them either. One day, some rough men came looking for one of Katy's uncles. We hid and managed to scare them away by shooting guns over their heads. After that, I knew Katy was in danger, and that she had to do something. Eventually, I figured it was the best thing for her if I left. And I did leave, too, but not for long, because Katie came after me and begged me to come back. She had just discovered a girl hiding in the barn. The girl was about to have a baby, and Katie needed my help with the birthing. That girl was Emma, a half-wit slave girl who was running away from some trouble we couldn't get her to tell us about. It was while we were trying to figure out what to do with Emma and the newborn baby, and when I was thinking about leaving again, that Katie came up with her crazy scheme. Her scheme was just this: for us to keep living at Rosewood alone like we had been, but to pretend that we weren't alone, to make like her father and brothers hadn't come back from the war, and that her mama and the slaves were still there. And that's why we were together that day, orphans and Civil War sisters, you might say. This trip into town, leaving Emma and her little baby boy William alone at Katie's house, was our first try to see if we could make people believe everything was normal and how it should be back at Rosewood. Chapter 2. The First Test. Katie came out of the store and walked toward the wagon, glancing up at me with a little smile on her face. Behind her, I saw the hawk eyes of Mrs. Hammond staring at us through the open window. "Don't say nothing, Miss Katie," I whispered, trying to keep my lips from moving. "She's watching." Katie started to turn around. "Don't look," I said. Katie turned back toward me. As she climbed up and sat down, I stared straight ahead, trying to keep the kind of look on my face that white folks expected out of colored slaves, dull and expressionless, like they aren't thinking of anything, like they don't even know how to think. But inside, my mind was racing. If we can make Mrs. Hammond believe everything is fine, I thought, we ought to be able to make anybody believe it. Katie took the lever, released the wheel brake, then flicked the reins, and we bounced into motion along the street. I knew we were both dying of curiosity to look back, but we couldn't yet, 'cause we both knew Mrs. Hammond was likely still watching us. "I did it, Mayme," Katie finally said softly. "I think I made her believe Mama sent me into town." "Don't forget, Miss Katie," I said. "We gotta go back and see her again." Suddenly I heard someone speaking to us. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Morning to you, Miss Kathleen," called out a friendly voice. I turned to see a tall, lanky black man on the side of the street, tipping his hat and smiling broadly. "Hello, Henry," said Katie, pulling back on the reins, then stopping the horses. The man approached. I saw his eyes flit toward me for a second, but I still kept looking straight ahead. It was a little hard, though, 'cause sauntering up beside him, a couple steps behind, was a black boy just about as tall who looked about the same age as Katie and me. I could feel his eyes glancing my way, too. "How's your mama, Miss Kathleen?" he said. Everything's just fine, Henry." A funny expression came over his face, like he'd noticed Katie stepping sideways to avoid answering his question directly. But before he could say any more, Katie spoke up again. "This is Mayme, Henry. She's going to, work for us." "Dat right nice. How do, Miss Mayme?" "I's pleased to make your acquaintance." He paused briefly, then looked to his side and then back. "I don't believe you two ladies has ever made acquaintance with my son Jeremiah. Jeremiah," he added, looking at the boy, "say hello to Miss Kathleen and Miss Mayme." The young man took off the ragged hat he was wearing, glancing down at the ground and kind of shuffling like he was embarrassed, then looked up at the wagon. "How do?" he said. "Glad to know you both." I never knew you had a son, Henry," said Katie as the boy looked down again. Does my mama know?"